Bij klokken. Ja, oké. Testing. Ja, de wekker fungerer.
That's good.
Vi har ju 4 minuter, så... Kanske ni som står i ingången, ni får gärna komma och sitta. Det blir fint med några familiar faces. Har ni haft en bra dag idag? Ja. Massa olika information, allt på en gång. Det kommer bli spännande. Så vi har 3 minuter kvar innan vi ska begynna. Så jag tänkte kanske ni kan andas lite. Jag får vänja mig för att stå på scenen. Feeling good?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay. And kanske we can, perhaps then we can get started. Welcome to our panel session on harnessing artificial intelligence, AI, to address climate change, biodiversity loss and pollution. GRID-Arendal has organised this session. We are a non-profit organisation who communicate the latest science to decision makers nationally and internationally to support them solving climate change, pollution and biodiversity loss. These 3 planetary crises require innovative and collaborative approaches that account for the complex society that we live in. Recent developments in machine learning and artificial intelligence tools have brought both technologies firmly into the spotlight, with advantages and concerns being expressed by many. Tonight, we have brought together experts from academia, research, and businesses to examine those advantages and concerns in addressing the urgent environmental challenges we are facing. They will explain how they use artificial intelligence and machine learning tools today and discuss what the future might bring in terms of leveraging cutting-edge technologies and interdisciplinary collaboration. Because together, we can pave the way for sustainable solutions and a brave future for our planet that ensures no one is left behind. But first, we would like to know a bit more about you, our audiences, today. So, if you can take out your smartphones and go to menti.com and enter the code that you see on the screen here. Our participants are more than welcome to also do this if you'd like. I'm going to take my earring out because it's tapping on the microphone. That's better. So, we are going to ask you a couple of questions about what sector do you mainly operate in? And what do you think? Perhaps I skipped forward a bit fast. Yeah, of course, I will. Sorry. Bit nervous, trigger happy. But the code is 39867033. And we would like to know what sector you're operating in. So you should be able to answer that question. Selecting local, regional government, national government, if you're part of a non-governmental organisation, from the private sector, or if you're from a non-profit organisation. I need a couple of nods from in the audience. Is it working? Yeah, we've got it? Good, good. It could just be that it takes a wee while to show up here. I'll give you another couple of seconds to sort that one out, and then we'll move on to the next question. What do you, our audience, think about artificial intelligence? Are artificial intelligence and machine learning the solutions to climate change, pollution, and biodiversity loss? Or is it other new technologies that will solve climate change, pollution, and biodiversity loss? And for this question, you can select from whether or not you strongly disagree with the statement to if you strongly agree with the statement. And it could be that our presentation is not talking right to process.
It worked.
But it worked? Okay, I heard that it worked. It worked, excellent. And we got to answer both questions. Yes, thank you, Signa, for testing that for me. How are we going in the audience? Both questions? Yeah, I'm seeing nods. Alrighty, I'm sure the results are really interesting. I can't see them. However, we're going to dive on into our panel discussion anyway. So we have 4 panelists tonight who will each introduce themselves. Oops. Let me see if I've got this right now. 4 panelists tonight who will each introduce themselves, their background, and their thoughts on artificial intelligence and machine learning in more detail. Here we go. Now we can see some interesting results popping in. First up, we have Chantal Tippett, a researcher from Oslo University. She will be followed by James Sample, senior engineer from NEVA. Then we will hear from Signe Rima Sørensen, research manager from Sintef, and then Øyvind Brekkhus Sandåker, the technology leader from the local company Egda Consulting. And we've done this in a new format where they've got 3 slides, 3 minutes per slide. They've been very good sports about preparing, so it's going to be very bam, 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 but I'm sure we're going to learn a lot about what they're talking about. After that, we will get into some key questions on how we can harness AI to solve the triple planetary crises and what we may need to consider. Okay, are you ready, Chantal? Over to you, if it's going to go ahead. I'm not sure where to point this.
Or do I just get a head start and I get more than 3 minutes?
There we go.
All right. Fantastic. Well, thank you so much. Very excited to be here tonight. My name is Chantal Tippett, and I am a doctoral candidate at the TIC Center for Technology, Innovation and Culture at the University of Oslo. So if you don't know the TIC Center, very briefly, we are based in the Faculty of Social Sciences, and we look at science, technology, and innovation from a social science perspective. So there's sort of one subgroup that focuses more on kind of the economics of innovation, another group that focuses more on the sociology of innovation. So very, very interesting place to be. Prior to joining the university, I spent about 9 years working in other sorts of science, technology, innovation roles with an increasing focus on data science and AI subjects over the last few years. And I focus kind of increasingly on questions around responsibility and ethics. And my research for my doctoral degree will be on the sustainability transition in food systems and how we can use sort of artificial intelligence to accelerate that and what some of the equity and ethical issues might be. And so one of the kind of key points that comes up a lot, I guess, in the work that I'm reading and the researchers and activists who have shaped my thinking on the topic of AI to date is really about how we define AI. And a lot of them are sort of cautioning us to think more expansively than just defining it as data sets and algorithms, and actually incorporating into our definition the social and technical practices, institutions, culture, and politics. So really thinking about AI as a socio-technical system rather than just a standalone technology. And I was trying to come up with a visualization that would help to show this. And so apologies, it is very hard to see. You're not supposed to be able to see the whole thing. But this is actually a fantastic project from 2018, so a few years old now, by Kate Crawford and Vladin Joler, called The Anatomy of an AI System, where they essentially break down everything that goes into an Amazon Echo. So they talk about the sort of mineral sides and then all the way through to the waste and disposal. So I highly recommend going to have a look at that. But I think what we want to take away from this is really that these technology systems are never neutral. So they embed values and reflect power dynamics. And so we always need to be asking, when they're developed and deployed, sort of who gains, who loses, and who gets to decide. And the picture of a bus is, maybe some people in the audience know it. I see a couple of smiles, so I think so. But it's this idea that artifacts have politics. So an old story about bridges being built too low for city buses to pass through in New York. And the idea being that this sort of kept people who were impoverished, a lot of racial minorities, from reaching nicer places in the city. And in the same way, AI can sort of build these infrastructures that control sort of who gets what, and it has really important equity issues. So that is my pitch, about 3 minutes. Great.
Over to James.
Okay, good evening, everyone. My name is James Sample. I'm part of the data science section at NIVA, which is the Norwegian Institute for Water Research. NIVA's interests cover everything related to the water environment, so from the mountains all the way down to the ocean, and we have about 450 employees with a diverse range of backgrounds and interests. Within my section, the data science section, we're mostly focused on data storage, analysis, and visualization. And that includes the use of techniques like machine learning and artificial intelligence. So for this presentation, I just want to show you one example of how NIVA is using machine learning to inform environmental management. It's called the CB project, and it's definitely one of the most fun and interesting things that I'm working on at the moment. The main aim of CB is to use flying drones to capture high-resolution imagery of the coastal zone. So you can see some of the drones that we use on the left of the slide here. We take thousands and thousands of pictures using these drones, and then we stitch them together to create mosaic images and surface models. So that's the middle of the slide here. And then we use machine learning to try and automatically identify the things that we're interested in. So we can count seabird populations, that's this image on the top here, although it's a bit fuzzy. We can also look at marine mammals, so we can consider seal populations, for example. Sometimes we can identify the species as well. We could look at marine litter by identifying plastic in the coastal zone, and we can also generate habitat maps automatically, which is what you can see on the bottom right. And all of these things can contribute towards environmental management. The main point that I would like to get across with this presentation is that effective environmental management requires effective monitoring. And one of the things that we're finding with CB is that this combination of modern data collection methods like flying drones combined with machine learning give us a very powerful toolkit. So we can map the coastal zone much more efficiently and potentially in a lot more detail than we've been able to do using traditional methods. And there's an example here from May where Nina managed to fly more than 400 seabird surveys in the space of just 2 weeks. They covered quite a large proportion of the southern Norwegian coastline, and that's something that would just be completely impossible using traditional survey methods. So in conclusion, I think that CB is a nice example of how machine learning can improve our knowledge of the current state of the environment, and that gives us the evidence base that we need to make better decisions. I think that's my time up.
Thank you so very much. Maybe just a few more seconds and then it's over to Signe.
Thank you. And thanks for the invitation to be here, and thanks to everyone for showing up. My name is Signe Rimer Sørensen. I'm research manager for analytics and AI at SINTEF. And in SINTEF, we have the vision of technology for a better society. And for us, a better society means using AI for industrial purposes, of increasing efficiency and minimizing waste of resources. So when I say AI, I don't mean ChatGPT. I talk about a whole lot broader range of technologies. Most of what we consider high living standards today involves electricity. We heat our homes, we cool them, we store our food in the refrigerator, we cook it on the stove, we vacuum clean, we run the washing machine, we watch television, we play computer. Even if we want to read an old-fashioned book, we turn on the electric light. Our mobility and our industries are also being increasingly electrified. So providing everyone globally with these standards, that would mean a massively increased demand for electricity. But already our current electricity consumption is sending us on a highway to hell. We need to do something. And AI can help us. It can help us reduce consumption by becoming more efficient in the way that we're using electricity. But we also need to transfer to greener energy. And it turns out that AI is crucial for this transition. Electricity is volatile. We don't have nearly enough battery capacity to store it, which means that we have to produce it and then immediately consume it. And already now, it's very, very complicated balancing this production with the actual demand. And then we want to introduce renewable energy. And by nature, renewable energy is fluctuating. It's uncontrollable. So we're now making this problem of balancing even harder. I'm going to give you some examples on where AI can help us. On smaller scales, we could use data to learn how solar panel production fluctuates when clouds are passing overhead the solar panels. And then we can let AI stabilize the production so we don't get the fluctuations. Or we can use AI to turn the wind turbines so that we optimize the production during turbulence. On larger scales, there are more than 1,000 reservoir hydropower plants in Norway. That's way too complicated for a person to decide which ones need to ramp up and down in the next few minutes because the wind turbines are going to fluctuate in their production. But an AI assistant could help. On the extreme scales, we have more than 11,000 kilometers of electric transmission cables in Norway in a complicated grid. And the capacity of each line depends on the electric load. It depends on external factors such as temperature, wind, humidity. AI can help us find feasible configurations of this grid, but it can also provide database decision support when we are going to expand the grid.
Okay, thank you, Signe. Over to Øyvind.
Hi, I'm Lorna and GRID-Arendal. Thanks for inviting me. My name is Øyvind Brekkhus Sandaker. I come from a local consultancy and product development company called Egde. We are based in various parts of Norway, Grimstad, Kristiansand, Porsgrunn, and up north in Tromsø. We mainly do product development and services for municipalities and GRID-Arendal and the likes. We like to take part in what's happening around our offices, and we're kind of representing the business, as you mentioned at the start. So participating in this event and participating in Arendals Uka is just second nature for us. We work with GRID in different things. For example, we're working with UNEP report, which we'll cover later. So during my career as a software developer, I've had a habit of using all sorts of buzzwords. At the same time as I mock my own use of said buzzwords. In my opinion, using them without any context will just bring chaos to any discussion and not value. We need domain experts to understand what AI can do. To draw a parallel, I remember my father, a banker by profession, dedicated countless hours mastering tools like Word and Excel, ultimately earning his datakortet or data card. In much the same way, today's professionals, regardless of their domain, need to invest time in understanding AI capabilities within their specific realm. Only when we do this can we really see all the great things it can offer. It's not just about using AI, but really getting how it can help in what we do. Think about it like this. Back in the days, we learned Word, or My dad learned Word and Excel. Now we need to get the hang of what AI can do for us. When techie AI folks team up with nature experts, they can come up with cool ways to help with problems like climate change, losing animals and plants, and pollution. AI isn't magic, but with the right know-how, it can seem pretty close. The more we dig in, the more wonders we'll discover. If we take our time, work together, and keep learning, we can use AI to make a better world for everyone.
Thank you, Eyvind. That was brilliant. Okay, thank you all for your introductions and for being such good sports with our 3-minute, 3-slide format. I'm going to sum up a bit. Your main message, Chantal, was that AI embeds values and reflects power. James, we need to think there are multiple different applications, and effective management can be supported using AI through effective monitoring on the scales that we need to do it at. Eyvind, we should be looking at investing time in understanding artificial intelligence, and we all go on the journey together to learn these tools. And Signe, the AI can help us with the green energy transition, with computing the scales of data that we need to make that happen. Thank you so much for these insights and your backgrounds and perspectives. I'm going to invite you all to kind of come and stand a bit further into the stage, out of the dark and into the light. And we're going to kick off with our questions for the evening. So, the first question that we have tonight is, can artificial intelligence, help us solve environmental challenges? And if so, how? Signe, would you like to kick us off?
Sure. As I mentioned, it not only can help us, we actually need it for the green transition. AI cannot solve it all, but it can help us. It can help us reduce waste of energy. For instance, Google reduced the energy consumption of their servers by almost 15% by letting a machine learning agent taking over the control system of the cooling. And as I mentioned, we also needed to tackle the problems that we get when we want to introduce fluctuating renewable energy into our energy system.
That's fascinating. 15% is actually quite a lot. Eyvind, your thoughts?
Yeah, as Signe mentioned in the start, AI isn't ChatGPT, but ChatGPT can help a lot with translating what experts say about pollution, biodiversity, and translate it to what it means for one citizen. So I think that tools and services like ChatGPT can really help translating complex subjects into more grasping things for each individual, no matter where they live in the world.
That's really interesting. Thinking back to your perspective on effective management and how AI can support that. James, how can AI help us solve these environmental challenges?
I don't think AI is going to solve climate change or biodiversity loss, but I do think it has a role to play. And I think if you're looking at managing some kind of environmental system, whether it's a small local ecosystem or whether we're talking about the whole global climate system, there's always some things that you want to know. So you want to know the current state of the system, and we can use AI to help with that, whether that's mapping deforestation in the Amazon or sea ice in the Arctic. Next, you probably want to know where the system's heading, what's changing, what might it look like in 5 years or 10 years. So that's like a predictive modeling challenge, and AI can help with that as well, especially in combination with other modeling approaches. And then finally, you want tools to help you actively manage the system. So that's the kind of thing that Signe was talking about. AI is really good at system optimization. And so I've been involved in projects where we've done precision farming, where we've tried to help farmers apply fertilizer in the right place and in the right amount so the plants get everything they need, but we don't pollute the water. We have a project at the moment where we're using AI to try and optimize aquaculture, so we reduce the environmental footprint, but we maintain production. So lots and lots of different applications in management, I think.
That sounds really interesting, because when we're thinking about these applications, it refers a bit back to what you were saying, Eyvind, about how we need to learn to use these tools. With multiple different applications, you've got multiple different user groups who need to use these tools and understand them and trust them. For just heading over to you, Chantal, do you think AI, or what's your perspective on whether or not AI can help us solve these environmental challenges?
Yeah, I would agree that I don't think it's going to solve these huge challenges by itself. I think it can play an important role, however. And coming back to the point that I made earlier about it having sort of values embedded and being a reflection of power dynamics, and therefore it matters a lot who is involved and who gets to make decisions. I think it's really important that we include in not a tokenistic way, so include in an active way, those who are most likely to be sort of negatively impacted both by climate change as well as by AI systems. And just very briefly, I heard of a really fantastic project along these lines recently, which I need to look at the acronym. It's the FEEDS project, the Food Equity and Environmental Data Sovereignty Project. It's being run by the University of Saskatchewan in Canada, where I'm originally from. And their aim there is to combine traditional knowledge of Indigenous elders with data science and big data approaches to monitoring and having early warning systems for food insecurity and food sovereignty. And it's a really exciting project because it's sort of community-led from beginning to end, and it is also going to be sort of evaluated in a very rigorous way, because that's another big problem, is that we have a lot of emphasis around sort of getting these projects up and running, but we often don't know actually if they're effective, what the real implications on the ground are. And so I think that's a really nice example of how these types of technologies and tools can be used in a way that's equitable and also contributing to solving these really big pressing issues.
It is very interesting. So we can't. What I hear from our panel tonight is that it will not solve climate change, pollution, and biodiversity loss on its own, but there is a lot of potential there. What I start to wonder about, so if we have all of these wide range of options and how we can use AI and machine learning, these tools can be quite new, especially for how we use them in policy making and in our daily lives. So how can we trust that these technologies serve our best interests, and what happens if something goes wrong? Chantal, how might using artificial intelligence go wrong? And when it does go wrong, who would be responsible?
Yeah, so that is an enormous question for a minute and a half, and there are whole communities of really talented people working on that. So, I mean, I won't, try to go over everything, obviously, but I just tried to jot down, some of the really big sort of overarching themes where things can go wrong. So, as I mentioned, first of all, these, projects or systems as we develop them might just not work. We might put a ton of effort and resources into something that is just, not going to function, actually, and that's something that's often overlooked. A lot of concern around the sort of transparency and interpretability of, for example, the models that are being used, and this can be particularly challenging and difficult, say, for policy decisions. So we need to be able to understand, how is that decision, being reached. There can be a lot of issues around sort of biased or unfair systems, and so again, there's a whole community that's sort of trying to focus on what do we mean by, fair machine learning, what do we mean by, fair AI, and then obviously we can also have malicious uses of these technologies, and so that's another sort of whole dimension. I would say that one of the other risks that often gets overlooked, which I think is important also to mention, is that if we place sort of too much emphasis and faith in AI and technologies more broadly, we might miss out on other sort of really important solutions that might be more social or political in nature. So I think that we need to really kind of be careful about focusing way too much on that. And in terms of who's responsible, again, I think there's a lot of different ways to address that. But I want to just point quickly to the work of Madeleine Claire Elish, who's termed this idea of the moral crumple zone, which is where we have a tendency to sort of blame the human operators in these complex systems when something goes wrong. And so I think probably lots of us can agree that that's maybe not the right way of assigning responsibility, but we need to have better sort of legal mechanisms for understanding responsibility, and I have a lot more to say, but probably not enough time, so I'll stop there.
We're going quite well for time, but I'm just curious, Signe, if you'd like to add anything towards that.
Yes, of course, all technologies can be misused. And AI is a new tool and should be regulated on par with all other technologies and tools. But when it comes to the energy, for instance, the usage in the energy sector, the benefits comes from automating and automating highly complex processes. But you don't start by training an AI to control all of the 11,000 kilometers of grid lines in Norway.
It's a lot of kilometers.
It's a lot of kilometers. It's a huge system. Instead, you start by letting it provide suggestions to a human operator for a smaller region. And then you slowly scale up. And then you might, when you start trusting it, you might automate. But also you're going to need explanations. You can't just do with blind AI just providing you suggestions. We need to develop methods that can actually provide you explanations so that it makes sense what it's doing.
That's interesting. You almost got in there. What I liked about your answer was that you got into how we must build up, the AI must build up the trust in that it's actually computing the right things, while we also must build up the trust that it is computing the right things, which I find quite interesting. And then this idea of automating all of these complex processes. Perhaps, James, you'd like to add to that. What's your perspective on if it goes wrong, who's responsible, and how might it go wrong?
I think there are lots of different levels of responsibility here. So I think at the most basic level, the individual users need to take some responsibility for fact-checking the information that you get from an AI system in the same way that you're responsible for fact-checking anything that you get from the internet. But I think at a much higher level, there are also organization level responsibility for the tech companies developing these algorithms to do so responsibly and to make sure that they're deployed safely. That's a big question that we don't really have a clear answer for when it comes to deploying really powerful algorithms. And there's also government level responsibility as well. So ultimately, I think we're going to need some kind of coordinated international agreement on how the next generation of really powerful AI systems are developed and deployed. Maybe something like an AI equivalent of the International Atomic Energy Agency, which is the organization that tries to monitor and check up on countries developing nuclear capabilities, something like that.
Excellent. So from our first question, we found that no, AI will not solve these environmental challenges on its own, but it can help. And now we sound, if I'm understanding correctly, we're talking about a coordinated effort to ensure that responsibility is taken to make sure that nothing goes wrong. When I'm thinking about this and computation, I'm aware that there are a number of servers all around the world busily whirring away, computing things. There must be hidden costs to using these kinds of tools. What is the cost of using these technologies in terms of computing, emissions, and society? I'm going to start with you, Øyvind. Do you have any view on what the cost might be?
It's huge in terms of energy. And when we talk about the cost, I think it's very important that the benefit outweigh the cost. So if it can help part of the world understanding how to use a grid system or deploying it, and it might benefit the Earth. So I think it's just always remembering that it must be that it must outweigh its cost. But also in terms of societies, it's just what ChatGPT has learned me is that when I'm communicating with my parents, just to have a bit of fun with them, I can write. I was watering their plants when they were on vacation, and I could tell them, write it in the lingo of an old man doing some novel thing in Grimstad, and it would be like listening to Henrik Ibsen or Knut Hamsun, which is just where I live. So it's. But that also brings in, is it worth having fun with? Because that will kind of,
of course,
cost the environment even more just to have some fun with like a LLM model. So yeah, there's a lot of things to consider when thinking about the cost. And are you allowed to use it just for kicks or?
Yeah. And that's very interesting when we think about the terms. You've said that the cost of using it in terms of energy is huge, but as a society, we like to tell stories, we like to have fun, whereas the value, how do we ascribe a value to that kind of thing? James, what is your thought in terms of the costs?
Yeah, so I agree that machine learning and AI does have a really significant environmental footprint, especially if we think about the large language models like ChatGPT, because one of the things that characterizes those is that they can be trained in parallel using lots and lots and lots of computer processors. So the demand for those processors has increased a lot recently, and the semiconductor manufacturing process itself has a huge demand for energy. It also uses a lot of water. It has some nasty waste products that we have to deal with. And that's before you even get to the energy consumption of running the chips and training the models. So I think there's a lot of work that we could do to reduce the impact. We're not going to make it go away. There's always going to be a significant footprint, but we can make greener data centers and we can make greener chip manufacturing plants. But again, it probably needs regulations because the companies aren't going to do it voluntarily. It costs money to do this in a greener way.
Of course. Now, I want to refer to you, Signe, because you've been very good with some details and hard facts and figures behind this. In terms of hidden costs to using such tools, what can you add to the discussion here?
I read recently an estimate that in January this year, ChatGPT consumed the same as approximately 100,000 Danish households. So that's quite a lot of electricity. And that was not the training. That was just the queries that it got. It also got 590 million queries in January. So that's more than 220 per second.
Yeah.
If you want to use these models on the energy sector, yes, of course, 11,000 kilometers of grid lines with a couple of sensors per kilometer or whatever, that's also a lot of data. And 1,000 power plants with lots of sensors, that's also a lot of data. But it's nowhere near the amount of some significant fraction of the internet that ChatGPT was trained on. So we're talking much smaller models, even though they're big, they're much smaller. And most likely we don't want to solve everything in one go, we want to solve even smaller models. And we're definitely not going to query them 220 times per second. On the other hand, what we do want to solve is a problem that has a very high complexity in terms of computational power, or in terms of what it would take to solve it. And we need the machine learning to simply, we cannot do everything directly, we need the machine learning to do it approximately, to actually be able to do it.
No, that's really interesting. So it sounds like, just to sum up, that there is a huge cost in terms of energy, but that the cost could be outweighed by the benefit that we would receive, and especially regarding how we use our electricity. Under the UN Sustainable Development Goals, we're often talking about inclusivity, diversity, and equality. When we're working with AI tools, how can we ensure that no one is left behind? We're talking about very digitalized, highly technical, access to power, access to Wi-Fi connections, access to cloud computing types of tools. Chantal, you referred earlier to how AI embeds values and reflects power. How can we ensure that no one is left behind?
Yeah, I think it's such an important question. And I think maybe though the language of leaving no one behind can also be a bit misleading, because it might give the impression that we're starting from a blank slate, whereas, of course, we're really not. And so, again, if all of these technologies are being developed in the global north with a particular sort of worldview, a particular set of concerns and considerations, then that might just be sort of exacerbating a lot of the existing inequalities, also creating new ones. But I think it's just important to be really clear that we're already starting from a very uneven territory. There are already people being left behind, and it's just a question of whether this is going to kind of widen that gap, or if there's a way to help it to kind of fill the gap. And so the project that I mentioned before around sort of data sovereignty and an early warning system for food insecurity in indigenous populations, I think is a really good example of how, if we want these systems to really benefit those who are marginalized or who are already being sort of negatively impacted by climate change, they need to be involved in the process of making decisions about how how data is collected, how the algorithms are trained, how it's deployed in practice, and how it's evaluated. And so there are lots of really exciting initiatives, I think, going on around this. So there are projects that are happening on the ground, but there are also initiatives like the Distributed AI Research Institute, which was started by the former Google employee Timnit Gebru. And she's basically aiming to really bring in much more active research around AI from the global south and use it to make the kind of wider landscape more equitable in that regard.
Wonderful. Sounds like there's a lot of work to be done. Just in terms of time, Owen, do you have a quick answer that you could also share? How can we ensure that no one is left behind from your business perspective?
I've been working with software development for a long time, so this is kind of just more development just in AI, and so also thinking of including everyone, all genders, all sizes from all around the world. So even though we think that AI is something new, as you said, it's mainly not. It's development and putting teams together, collaborating. So just don't leave any persona behind.
We're going to take everybody along on this journey to learn all of our tools.
And also domain experts, bringing them on board. And so it's not just the ones creating the models or the algorithms, but also the ones who use it.
Wonderful, wonderful. We're starting to lead towards the end of our session tonight. So what I'd like to do is to ask each of our panelists to give their perspectives of, if they're gazing into the crystal ball perhaps, or perhaps not, how does the future look regarding the contributions that AI and machine learning can make to solving climate change, pollution, and biodiversity loss? Chantal, we'll start with you. What does it look like?
Well, I mean, I think if I had the actual answer, I'd be making a lot more money. But no, I mean, obviously none of us really know for sure what's going to happen. But because I'm coming at this question, I guess, from the sort of social sciences angle, I thought I would maybe just bring in a couple of quick ideas from those domains, just to give people something to think about, some ideas that they could look into if they're more interested. So on the more sort of economics of innovation side, I think the answer to that question would depend a lot on whether we think of AI as something called a general purpose technology. So is AI like something like electricity? That is going to be so pervasive, it's going to kind of include all industries, all applications, everything that we're doing, or is it going to have much more sort of niche applications? And the answer to that question, I guess, will determine to some extent, what we can do in terms of guiding it and regulating it and so on. And then from the more sociological side of the innovation research perspective, we might bring in this idea of socio-technical imaginaries, which is basically to say that there are lots of different ways of thinking about the future and what the energy system might look like down the road, what sorts of technologies are going to be the most interesting or impactful, and lots of different groups will have different sort of imaginaries that then shape their decisions, I guess, in the present day. And so there's a lot of really interesting research happening to sort of draw out those different imaginaries and help kind of keep our vision a little bit more open so that we don't get too constrained and too focused on one way of thinking about the future, and we make sure that we're kind of integrating a lot of different perspectives. So.
Wonderful. That sounds like an exciting future. I'm going to refer now to James. What might the future hold?
I think there are good reasons to feel positive about the direction in environmental science with the help of machine learning and AI. I think especially because the technology that we have for measuring the environment is improving so rapidly in parallel. And so what we're seeing in environmental science at the moment is that we're gathering more and more data than we've ever seen before, and we need tools to help us make sense of this kind of wave of data, so to turn that data into knowledge. And I think machine learning and AI are two of the components that will hopefully help us to do that. So I'm optimistic that partly with the help of AI, we will see an acceleration in progress in environmental science in the coming decade or so. Fingers crossed.
That also sounds very exciting. The speed at which science can be conducted. Oyvind, what do you think the future can hold for us in terms of using AI to solve the challenges of climate change, pollution, and biodiversity loss?
Yeah, I'm positive, but at the same time, I have some genuine concerns, as I mentioned, with using vast amount of energy. So we need the green infrastructure, as you mentioned. The environmental footprint might negate some of the benefits. And moreover, past attempts on creating models have created models that aren't accurate. So misleading strategies might be the output of some of the investments you do. And the global digital divide also means that solutions might not be available for everyone. And when we talked about diversity, also favoring the global north, which we are part of. So we might not see it as clear as everyone else. So going forward, if we decide on leaning on AI heavily, it's crucial to do so with caution. We need to weigh the environmental cost of AI, but especially these large language models, which consume vast amount of energy. Yeah, so we need to be sure that it's part of the solution and not adding to the problem.
No, that's a very good point to make. Thank you for that, Oyvind. And then lastly, I'm going to refer to you, Signe. What can the future hold?
I do share some of Øyvind's concern, but if you want to keep electricity, then we need the AI. We need industrial type AI and data-driven models to help us manage the transition to green energy in terms of reducing demand, in terms of the transmission, and in terms of the balancing the production. But it's also going to cost us in terms of resources for developing the models and developing them to be trustable. And while we're waiting for that to happen, we can all as individuals try to help and reduce consumption before we need the AI to do it for us.
That's a very nice message. Thank you very much. I think we've heard a number of ways in which AI can contribute to solving these different environmental challenges. We need to be aware of the balances of power and accessibility when we're using these tools. We can look forward to new and perhaps faster, faster scientific advances. That the energy consumption is something that we need to be aware of, and the costs and benefits of using this could be far wider than what we know already. But that at the end of the day, solving these environmental challenges will not happen just through using and implementing AI tools. We also need to look at changing our behaviours and how we operate as a society. I think I've summed up all of our perspectives on the stage. What I'd like to invite our audience to do after hearing from these experts, if you can pick up your smartphones again and go back to menti.com and pop in our code here. 39867033 at menti.com. And then we have our final question of the evening, which is whether or not you're agreeing or disagreeing with the 3 statements that we have there. I'm just going to have a look at my technical support woman in the corner. Yeah. So we've heard from all of our panelists tonight. What do you think now about the possibilities that we have for using artificial intelligence and machine learning when trying to solve the climate change crisis, the pollution crisis, and biodiversity loss? Give you some seconds to have a think and answer there. Okay.
I think it's up again. I think you did something. Maybe. No.
Did you press C?
Please wait or ask the presenter to. Could you, Orna, could you just open the voting?
Looking back towards Mariana. If we can't get it to work, then I'll just ask for a show of hands. AI and machine learning are the solution to climate change, pollution, and biodiversity loss. Are we strongly agreeing or strongly disagreeing? Strongly agreeing, raise your hands. 1, 2, 3, 4, yeah. Strongly disagreeing, raise your hands. Is it the solution? No, kind of, almost. Yes, no. Strongly in the middle. Raise your hands. Not sure, still not sure. Okay. Then for our next one, do we think that these are trustworthy solutions? Yes, trustworthy solutions to use AI and machine learning when solving these challenges. Strongly yes. A few. Strongly no. 1. And then strongly in the middle. Yep, majority. Okay, good. And then our last one, that AI and machine learning are absolutely not currently good solutions to climate change, pollution, and biodiversity loss. Do we agree with this statement? They're absolutely not. I have one very strong agreement, accompanied by a nod. What about strongly disagreeing? Yeah. And in the middle. I'm starting to suspect we're majority. Thank you so much for your patience with this. Lastly, on behalf of GRID-Arendal, I would like to sincerely thank our experts, if you'd like to line up again on the stage, for joining us tonight and sharing such important information on our topic. Let's have a round of applause for Chantal Tippett from the University of Oslo. Thank you. Signe Rima Sørensen from Sintef. Øyvind Brekkhus Sandåker from IGDA Consulting. Thank you. And James Sample from NEVA. Thank you very much. And if I can get the screen, I'm not sure I'm supposed to point it. But eventually, yeah, there we go. If you want, please fill in the QR code to give us some feedback and evaluation on our event tonight. Thank you for being an amazing audience and have a wonderful evening. You all did so.